I see we're coming up on 11:02. I'm going to go ahead and get started a little bit. I want to make good use of time. We've got 30 minutes here today to cover a lot of topic. My name is Patrick Girding, and Matt Arneson and I from R0 here, we're going to share a little bit about private and public sector built environments and how we can help and where the challenges are in creating energy efficient spaces there. As I mentioned, I'm Patrick Girding, and I am our public sector sales director for the public sector writ large. So federal government, state, local municipalities, quasi-governmental agencies. That's really my focus. And I've been wandering around this universe for about 20 years or so, heavily invested in the VA, federal environments, and other areas. And so I'm bringing that to bear with R0 to help define and build public spaces that are healthy and productive for us all. Matt Arneson is with us as well today and is going to be helping out. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Excellent. I appreciate it, Patrick. I appreciate everybody's time here this morning. My name is Matt Arneson, and I'm our R0 sales director. We're focused on our commercial and our enterprise clients. I've been working in the building intelligence, building efficiency, sustainability arena for a little over a decade now. So very excited to be able to come here and share a little bit about how R0 is really connecting the dots when it comes to building intelligence within your workspaces. We're really going to focus on some of the critical factors influencing your building optimization for your people, your energy, your sustainability. We want to focus on topics such as your occupancy, your indoor air quality, your energy use, your indoor health, and really how the various parts of the building and occupant industry really kind of tackle all of those factors. And really then where the R0 is designed as a solution to meet your needs. So we hope you take away from this webinar really a better understanding of how your challenges either may be similar or that might differ from other people on this call, and then where and how you can get started in using granular workspace data to optimize your buildings. For the logistics of this webinar, we obviously ask you to mute your microphones for the webinar, but please feel free to use the chat function on the right-hand side to ask questions or offer your own perspectives. We are planning to leave the last 5 minutes of this webinar for a short Q&A session.
Fantastic. One of the things we wanted to address is why is this important now? We've got folks joining from around the country looking for this, but what's spurring this discussion? What's really going on right now? So I want to talk a little bit about what the drivers are within the public sector. There are really 5 or 6 key things that are happening that are creating a need for healthy and efficient public sector spaces. RTO mandates are a big thing, not only at the federal level, but all the way down to local municipalities. We're trying to figure out how to build an environment that encourages people to come back into the office in a schedule that works well for both the agency and the people. We've also got a lot of development and evolution of smart building technologies. The GSA just announced last week $80 million to fund projects that do smart building things that help us be more efficient. Also, a big problem is both that third bullet and the last one. Budgets are really hard, and we're seeing a real shift of lease versus own and how that balance occurs and how it impacts budgets for agencies. And then lastly, the stat I love to think about in this is that 80% of the buildings that we have right now in the public sector that are going to serve us in 2050 exist today. So we can't make ideas or promises about building brand new buildings all over the place because we've got to work with what we have.
Perfect. And as Patrick and I were putting this webinar together, we certainly are tackling building intelligence inside workspaces from different parts of the industry, both public and private. And what we found was there's certainly some similarities, but obviously some differences as well. For instance, when it comes to private and commercial real estate, the cost of energy and the rising cost of energy is becoming more and more prevalent. There was a Moody's report that came out in early 2024 that talked about the compound annual growth rate for utilities between 2020 and 2023 was somewhere in the range of 8.2 to 10.9%. So that's we're talking about almost a 10% increase over a three-year span. In comparison, the consumer price index increased about 4% over that time. And so for private and commercial real estate, energy bills typically hit the bottom line. These savings are tangible. So in other words, energy use is financially material to both the building owners' operating expenses and their ability to really fund capital improvements. Added to this, again, there is a strain of a changing workplace. Hybrid work environments are creating a scenario where less people are occupying a building at any given time, but They may be more spread out in terms of both space and that time. So meaning the building still has to operate during those maximum hours per the day, but with much less occupancy. And likewise, both tenants and space occupiers are gaining more focus and incentives around energy savings. And so there's also this push toward giving more visibility and transparency across all the stakeholders within the building, tenants, operators, owners, so they have a full understanding of how everybody's individual space is being utilized and their current energy use. And then lastly, the visibility around a lot of these energy and sustainability initiatives are really summarized by way of industry-wide reporting and certifications. And whether that be an annual sustainability report coming from your organization to very specific target-based awards like Energy Star, LEED, all these things are really meant to be able to summarize and articulate how your buildings are really performing from an energy or sustainability perspective.
That's great. It's interesting to look at those and realize that there's two kind of different pillars here, the public and the private, but there might be some commonalities across this, you might think, and you would be right. There really are some common threads through both of those that exist.
And so this is where Petra and I really put our heads together and came across a number of common factors. And the first is really budgets. Now, the process of creating and approving budgets may differ between the private and the public organizations. However, what you are budgeting for, both capital and operational needs, exists in very similar fashion. You're really solving for the same building needs: space sensing, HVAC, building automation, lighting. These are all factors within your facilities that you really need to and are challenged to find budget space for.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's really interesting that Matt and I were talking about is that the need for internal stakeholders. I think I've always thought within the public sector that there's a really diverse group of people you have to bring to bear to make decisions. But that's really true in the corporate world and the private sector as well. There's a lot of similarity there. Making sure that you have all the right people at the table to talk about and make these decisions to drive sustainability and efficiency is really key. It's not just a facilities management decision anymore. There's a lot of people that are involved.
And even adding then to that, just the compliance between climate regulation has come about. Again, they may be called different names, whether it's your GRESB reporting, your sustainability summary, Energy Star, LEED. These are all different forms of supplying a visualization or a summary to either comply to the public entities or to your private stakeholders, how your buildings are performing and how and where are you meeting your energy and your sustainability goals.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing that's really weighing on both the public and private sector is a very tight labor market. It's really difficult to recruit and retain people, whether you be a municipality or a business that's down the street. So you need to be able to be providing spaces that are both efficient and sustainable, but are also welcoming and healthy and productive for your people that you're able to hire and do that, because it's really expensive to bring somebody in, and it's far more expensive if they leave you. So being able to recruit and retain people within this tight labor market is elemental to a building or to a business or a agency success.
And then lastly, if you hadn't seen it already, earlier this spring, R0 shared our Building Intelligence Index based on shared insights in space use and optimization across a number of different industry sectors. And what might come as a surprise is that as a general summary of that data, what we found was there's a lot of crossover in how various building types are utilizing their spaces. So many organizations, again, we talked a little bit about the back to work mandates and the hybrid work mandates. So many organizations are moving away from a traditional one cube, one office, one desk workspace to more open environments, collaborative spaces. And that goes for both public and private sectors. So that you guys are really, really faced with very similar types of workspaces that you're also challenged to solve from an energy efficiency standpoint. Patrick, I know obviously that talks a little bit about maybe the why that this conversation and webinar is worthwhile, but really let's maybe dive into the what. Really, what is the value that having very data-centric driven building automation intelligence can bring for organizations?
It's critical, Matt, and you're exactly right. The first one that's really key is making the absolute best use of the space that we have. Whether you're owning an office building or whether you're leasing it, you've got to be able to make the best use of that space. So you can't have wasted desks or conference rooms that aren't being used, or lighting turning on in places where nobody is, or HVAC circulating. So being able to really gather the data that tells you which spaces are currently being used right now in this moment and which are going to be used over time prospectively is critical. I think one of the most important things, we talk a lot about AI these days and the ability to do generative AI, but some of the simplest AI is being able to take data that we can gather from sensors and understanding about environments and be able to project and look ahead and say, okay, with the employees I have and the number of people I have, here's the space I really need to be able to use so I can make intelligent decisions about reconstruction, retrofits, lease decisions to expand or shorten where I am. Being able to do this is really critical. And then you can identify those areas that really need your attention and manage them effectively.
That's great. And obviously, a big portion of building intelligence is really reducing energy and, as a byproduct, reducing the carbon emissions footprint for a facility. And this is, again, an area where a lot of organizations have attempted, and some to varying degrees of success, trying to find improving their energy efficiency of the building by using occupancy data to intelligently control their HVAC system. And again, it is a challenge because it's hard, because no one wants to be wrong. The goal here is to be able to use occupancy data to more efficiently heat, cool, ventilate spaces that are in need. But the other challenge is the complaint mitigation aspect of facilities and operations, not getting people that are unhappy within their workspace and calling up facilities or operations to complain about what's happening within their space. So really the goal is really, if you can use occupancy data to actually know where people are and how many are in each of those spaces at a given time, and with a high degree of confidence, now you can adjust your HVAC accordingly. Focus your systems and the energy that those systems use on the spaces that are actively being occupied in real time. If you're measuring, for instance, indoor air quality for your space, and you're measuring CO2, you're measuring particulate matter, you're measuring VOCs, you have that ability to be able to understand and see how much you need to ventilate, heat, or cool that space based off of the people that are in those space during that time, rather than leave it to maybe the traditional solution would be more passive CO2 sensors, for instance, in the ventilation systems themselves. Oftentimes, it's a slow process to be able to pick up those changes and then make those changes. Oftentimes, ventilating a room after it no longer becomes occupied. And so our focus is using indoor air quality and space understanding, looking at things like VOCs, temperature, humidity. We can ensure that we're maximizing not just the energy use of that space, but also the comfort level of the occupants there as well.
Yeah, that really brings up a great point, Matt. It's key that we take all these decisions, but we have to have a space that's actually usable as well. So when you look at these things and you talk about how you can have a space that makes people productive and you're using less energy, a lot of times that comes at the cost of the occupants. And we don't want to do that. And great news is we don't have to. With the sensors and the skills and the integration that we have, we can actually meet a number of different goals simultaneously. We can create a healthy space that has fresh air sufficient for everyone, that has UV solutions that are killing germs that are in the space, and we can increase the overall well-being of the occupants through managing noise and luminescence of lights and making it a healthy, happy place to be working. And that's going to end up having, as we mentioned earlier, in the tight labor market with recruitment and retention, if you have a nice, happy place to be, and it's not just because you have dogs and snacks, but you're actually in a comfortable place where you have a desk and you're confident you're going to have a place to work where you can get your job done, you're going to be a happier, more productive employee, whether you're working in the private sector or in the public sector.
And just to add to that, I think comfort and productivity are really essential. And again, traditionally, you think of comfort as temperature. Is it too hot or too cold in that space? But there's so many other aspects of indoor air quality beyond temperature that come into the comfort, being, productivity of that space. You mentioned a few: noise, for example, different smells, VOCs, formaldehyde can often take away not just from that comfort level, but also being productive within that space. So it's really about not just, again, traditionally thinking of temperature or thinking of heat or cold or air ventilation, but all these other aspects that really come into play about how can you maximize the efficiency of that space itself.
Yeah, it's really important to think about this as IEQ. We often talk a lot about air quality, but this is environment quality. It's a holistic notion of all of these things working together for the building and the occupants. And I think one of the evolutions that's taken place, we mentioned earlier about the leap of smart building technologies, is the integratability, because so often in the past we've dealt with silos in all of these different areas that didn't talk to each other and didn't manage well, whether it be human resources and facilities or others. But now we have the opportunity to bring all those aspects together in a holistic approach that solves all of this and does it in an efficient way, and does it in a way that works in a lot of different types of spaces, irrespective of infrastructure that you might have. So IEQ as a whole is really important from that standpoint. One of the things that I think is really critical, we've talked a lot about this in an academic sense, but I want to bring the real world into this. So a great case study that we have, it was from a financial institution that was coming up on some lease negotiations and having to look very carefully and closely at the number of occupants they had, the people that were working there and employees, and what space they really needed. So they put in more than 1,300 sensors across 4 different floors of their headquarters, and managed over time to measure really carefully what was actually being used and how people were using different spaces like phone booths and hot desks and conference rooms and hallways and all kinds of different places where work is going on. And they could understand very clearly at a micro level what was happening on days and times, that they could then make some intelligent decisions about how they placed people, how they organized the environment, and then more importantly, what lease they need to be able to do. They were able to save millions of dollars simply because they didn't have to add a $5 million lease that they thought they might need. They just reconfigured the departments and made it more efficient and productive while saving that amount of money. Really key. So understanding those vacancies, understanding what desks are not being used, where it's just a backpack sitting in a conference room and not a person, or maybe your system's not working, your reservation system isn't working the way you expect. Understanding that can empower you to make some really powerful financial decisions. So that's the real world. That's the case studies that are out there. And we've got lots of other examples like that. But I really thought that one really sang a lot.
No, that's great. And I think maybe the key word that I think I want to pull out, though, you said, is that understanding. And obviously, both of us at R0, we are very much focused on solutionizing these challenges, these problems that both public and private sector buildings often face. The R0 platform is really about driving really fast return on investment that enables you to run your building more intelligently, more understandably, by delivering those occupancy insights, indoor air quality, health, energy savings, giving you not just data, but understanding about how you can best effectively utilize and control your space. And for us, it starts with highly scalable, easy to install space sensors that are battery powered. They use Bluetooth to communicate within your building. They use cellular to move that data into the cloud, so as not to penetrate that IT network. And our really goal is we want to be able to capture very detailed occupancy, active people counting, passive people counting. So things like computers, backpacks, jackets, and things like indoor air quality metrics, CO2, VOCs, temperature, humidity, formaldehyde, within all those individual workstations, conference rooms, workspaces, and be able to take all that disparate data in real time and generate massive amounts of granular data that then R0 then works to visualize and analyze and summarize via a Connect dashboard. And our focus is to generate insights that are going to help make people make more use of their space productively, and then be able to both not just change systems within their building, but also behaviors of your buildings in response to how are people using those spaces. And so that people can start to see that ROI and those benefits really immediately. Again, we're focused on being a very easy to use, easy to adopt, easy to maintain solution that doesn't require special skills or technical staff to be able to either run, install, or maintain it. Our focus, as you mentioned, understanding is the insights, not specifically the data. So we're committed to a modern understanding of a system that is open to make all that data accessible, and then to convert that data into something that's actionable for you.
Absolutely, Matt. I've always said that data in and of itself is great, but it's meaningless. If you can put context around it, it becomes really powerful and interesting. But then when you can connect it to an action where you actually do something with the data, that's where it's at its supreme level. And that's really where we want to take people, is to really be able to manage that and understand what they can do with the data. Because oftentimes we see occupancy, health, IAQ, and energy as conflicting. Because if I want to really have really good indoor air quality, a couple of years ago, our response was crank the HVAC up, just blow in outside air. That's incredibly inefficient. So you think that a lot of these things are actually conflicting with each other, but with the right platform that's in the center making intelligent decisions like R-Zeros, we can actually achieve all four of these in harmony. And that's the real key, is to be able to balance the cost effectiveness with the comfort, with everything else. I thought a really interesting comment in the chat, Dean mentioned talking about pest control and cleaning as a part of IEQ. And I think that's a really key point. Dean, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because one of the things that with these sensors and with all this data we can actually enable really smart cleaning protocols. We can provide actionable information to do real-time cleaning for certain spaces, nightly cleaning based on actual usage of spaces, enabling UV technologies and other things to do pest control and germicidal ultraviolet radiation and other types of things that really add to the overall environmental quality here, and do it in a way, as I said, that's really balanced here. We don't have to sacrifice health to be able to achieve energy and occupancy needs. We can do it all together because of two things: that metadata that we're getting based on actual use, and then the integratability, the integration and the openness of this architecture that allows you to connect to building management systems, to reservation systems, to financial systems, to be able to really understand the whole picture and act on it. I think that's a really critical point.
That's great. And I certainly wanted to wrap up just certainly by highlighting that R-Zero, we have a lot of experience working with a wide variety of organizations, both public, private, commercial, real estate organizations, to help them create high-performing buildings. Our focus, helping you guys save money, make a more productive and efficient use of your space. So I really hope what we shared here today resonates with some people on the call, not just about your goals, but also how to maybe get started with solutionizing against those goals. Patrick, we've got the last 5 minutes here of our webinar. I certainly want to be able to open up to some Q&A. I did have a question come in here earlier that I maybe wanted to just pose over to you, and then we can jump into some of the other ones that are coming up in the chat. So one of the questions I had gotten asked earlier into this was, hey, I don't have a brand new building. How do I look to incorporate building intelligence and sensor solutions into what they essentially called existing legacy systems?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt, because we're all faced with that. We're not going to be able to go out and build brand new $100 million buildings just to achieve this. We've got to deal with what we have. So one of the things that's really key to think about is these sensors we're talking about. We're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars to put these things in. They're a couple $100. They're battery operated and can just stick on a wall someplace or stick in a ceiling very simply and easily. So we were able to do this in a way without massive retrofits that take time and money to be able to be done. You can do it in your environment right now and right today. So I think that's a really key thing.
That's great. And Patrick, another question that popped up in the Q&A, and I think we may have a slide that we can help highlight this, but one of the people asked, can you share an example or a sample of what our data dashboard looks like? And so it'd be great to get a visual. And maybe while you're pulling that up, I would say that coming out of this conversation, please feel free to follow up with Patrick or myself. We'd be happy to give you guys a much deeper breakdown of our Connect dashboard, of how our sensors work and coordinate and pull that data into that dashboard, and try to give you as many live and real-time examples as possible.
So this is a good example of floor plans that we bring in to answer Maurice's question. So when we work with a client on our sensors, we bring in floor plans as detailed as we can and map out based on the square footage that each of the sensors can cover, wherever we need to put them, what type of space it is. Is it a desk that's there? Is it a conference room? And really map all that out so that then we can tailor that into the software and show in real time what's happening in that space.
That's great. I see a couple of comments and questions here just in terms of how does the R0 system or solution connect with, interlock with, integrate with your building automations or your building management or your energy management system. I think somebody had made a comment here earlier just in terms of, hey, it's like a BAS system on steroids. And I actually like that analogy quite a bit because really that's exactly what the R0 sensors and platform is built to do, is to give you another more granular layer of data that can feed into these systems. They integrate through an API so that your systems can make more intelligent decisions to understand, hey, I don't need to just have a simple schedule within my BAS system, but integrate to know, hey, I want to schedule, but I also want to know if nobody's in that room, I can turn off or down my air conditioning. Or if someone sets a backpack in my room, that's a good time for me to start to ventilate that room because even though it's passive people counting, I can assume or be aware that person's coming back. And so I would need to start to make that room more comfortable and more energy efficient for them while they are actually occupying that room. And so really it's that integration by feeding the data into those building automation systems, into those BMS systems at that layer so that those systems can really more appropriately automate the way that they were really built or intended to do.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is there is an infrastructure, BACnet, that's available that's ubiquitous for the most part. Unlike iPhone chargers, other stuff, there is some commonality that we can tap into, and that's one of the things we've tried to do is not necessarily tie into any particular thing. We want to be open here and feed data from as many different things as we can and to as many systems as we can to empower folks that are running those buildings to do what they need to do.
I know we've come up to the bottom of the hour here, so certainly appreciate everybody's time and attention on this topic around how to use space and indoor air quality data to create more energy efficient and building intelligence within your building infrastructures. As a follow-up, we'll gladly reach out to each of you to continue this conversation. We'd love to learn from everybody on today's call how, where, why they are in their energy and sustainability journey today, and certainly where and how R0 can help support you guys into the future. So certainly appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you.